The one question I wish he asked me looking back, which I think is important to ask any child, number one is, what life do you want? Because if he had asked me back then, I would have said, I want mansions, Lamborghinis, boats and all that type of stuff. And then the second question I wish he asked was, so what is it you want to do? Because when I was 15, I wasn't very academic. I didn't like school, so I wanted to be a PE teacher. I was never scared of failure, so I always thought I wanted more.
I think the biggest thing most people struggle with, that, like from a psychological standpoint, that stops them getting everything they want, is fear. But when you actually kind of break down like why you're afraid, it is often because you're worried about being embarrassed.
Mindset is number one. And I know it's the thing that people overlook most. I think that not being scared to fail. Like no matter what happened, I don't think I would have stopped. I've got such like a competitive mentality. No matter what I do, I want to win. And I don't know where that like really come from, but I think that's been the biggest thing for me, because there's some people that aren't very good at a lot of things, but they've got a mentality to win and want to win, and they end up being successful.
You mentioned before that one of your daughters is entrepreneurial. What would be your best piece of advice for her maybe in 10 years' time? So today we're joined by Dee Ludlow. I've known Dee for a few years. Dee has an interesting background coming from the valleys of Wales and has, I would say, a very wild range in terms of different entrepreneurial ventures you've gone into. You now run something called the 5D Club, 5D Capital Club. You focus a lot in terms of buying, selling businesses. So today I really want to like pick your brain in terms of what's taking you from Wales to now here in Dubai and doing a lot of big business moves around the world, and give the audience maybe a lot of insight in terms of things that got you into the position you are now. The first thing I kind of ask you is, if you look back maybe to the 15-year-old version of yourself, do you think you'd be in the position you are now at 37?
Yeah. Yes and no. Luckily, growing up in my household, my dad never really, I was never scared of failure. He sort of pushed me into it and into that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. So I always felt that I wanted more. The one question I wish he asked me looking back, which I think is important to ask any child, is, two questions. Number one is, what life do you want? Because if he had asked me back then, I would have said, I want mansions, Lamborghinis, boats and all that type of stuff. And then the second question I wish he asked was, so what is it you want to do? Because when I was 15, I wasn't very academic. I didn't like school. So I wanted to be a PE teacher because it's the only lesson I liked. And if he asked me those two questions, the one would have been the mansions, the boats and everything. And then the vehicle would have been PE teacher, which obviously that just doesn't work. So I was never scared of failure. So I always thought I wanted more. And I love travel. But yeah, they're the two questions I wish I was asked if I could go back. You
mentioned one thing there, loving travel. Why?
I never felt at home in Wales. And when I used to, even back then, I was just always watch like videos, or I was so intrigued about the world. Why would I want to stay in one place? And I used to travel as much as I could from as young as I could. And I feel like it gives you a different outlook on life, the world, just mindset in general. I think that's helped me a lot. And
one of the things I'm a big believer in is like the law of exposure. Like once you've been exposed to wealth, opportunities, you can't unsee that. And I think this is where so many people they're almost throttled by ignorance because they can't see the reality of like the opportunities in front of them, because they only see maybe the manipulated media in the UK, or like Karen down the fucking co-op saying X, Y, Z. And it's that kind of tall poppy syndrome where you can't go and do X, Y, Z, you can't go and achieve this. Is that something that you maybe felt a little bit in Wales?
Yeah, it was like crabs in a bucket. I think that the thing is in just the UK in general, it's a very like judgmental place. And obviously us being British as well. I feel that you have to try and I know it's hard to walk away from the crowd, but everything I felt I did growing up, regardless of what it is, because it may have been not normal to what everyone else is doing, people would take the piss, or, there's always people talking, and, and I feel like if you're not a resilient individual and you don't have a decent mindset, which is fortunately something I haven't struggled with. So I have sympathy for people that struggle with mindset. Luckily, it obviously affected me, but I would just power through it. I think if you're not resilient, it's quite easy to be like, well, I'm not going to do this because everyone's taking the piss. This isn't something that I should be doing. Or if I fail, everyone's going to take the piss even more. So luckily for me, I didn't care too much about it. I did in ways, but I'm glad that didn't stop me. But that's the UK. I feel that it's just part of it.
Is there a specific moment you remember someone taking the piss out of you when you were trying to do something?
So when I was a kid, I used to do music.
Okay.
And I was into basketball and music. And I remember just the way I dressed. I used to love America, so I was always like dressed like an American rapper. Really, you know, I used to have tracksuits, basketball vests. So you know, a lot of people used to just take the piss out of that because that wasn't normal. People don't dress like this, and people, why do you like that type of music? And I was influenced by that culture. You know, that I love basketball and I love music, and that used to really get to me, because I used to think, oh, I like this, you know, and this is the stuff that, if I walk into a shop, this is the stuff that I like, but no one else likes it at the time anyway. And obviously as time goes on, it's just become normal then.
Do you think a lot of people kind of held back by that? Because I think the biggest thing most people struggle with, that like from a psychological standpoint, that stops them getting everything they want, is fear. But when you actually kind of break down like why you're afraid, it is often because you're worried about being embarrassed. And then if you even like take that another level deeper of like, okay, who are you worried about being embarrassed in front of? And you start to go deeper down that kind of barrel, you're like, well, why the fuck do I care what this person thinks?
I think that's most of it, you know. Like I did used to fear of embarrassment. Of course I did. Even now, you know, if you run any form of paid ads, you know, people are always going to have something to say about it. You know, why are you doing this? You know, that's always going to happen. And I feel that the quicker you don't give a shit what people think, the better everything is, because you're not scared to do things. You just crack on, and it doesn't matter. And I think that that's something that does take a bit of time. But if we're honest with ourselves, you know, things that happen today get forgotten next week, and almost certainly everything gets forgotten at some point anyway. I think that most of the people that make those comments and talk about you, let's be honest, you just don't really give a shit about those people anyway. So it is a hard one to overcome. It's easy to sit here and be like, oh, it doesn't matter, forget about what people think. But the truth is, the earlier you do that, the better. Because I wish I didn't care earlier on. There were so many things that I should have done that I didn't, because I did care what people thought, even though I would have done it anyway.
I think this is one of the issues also with the internet and technology, is that everyone could be a keyboard warrior. Like, I have people who troll me all the time on ads, whatever. Like, no one has ever said anything rude to me face to face, like ever. So like, and that's, I think it's just an interesting paradigm of kind of human society, and also how wrong it is, because people aren't willing to they'll say one thing to your face and one thing behind your back, which I think is, when you get more life experience, you kind of get more aware of who you should trust and kind of the character traits of the people you want to kind of hang around with.
Well, I find that there's two ways you really find, someone shows their true character is when they're under pressure. So, you know, if you just go into business with someone, you know, everything's great at the start, super optimistic. When things start going south, then you start to realize someone's true character because the way they act in that situation. Then also, when you're around someone and someone else's name comes up, and you know what that person has to say about that individual, especially if they know them and then they act differently around them. I think those two situations, you definitely find out what someone's really about and someone's true character.
So similar to myself, you've been involved in many different businesses. You mentioned something there about like people mentally handling things when things are going badly. What do you think is the best way for maybe people to kind of compartmentalize that as an entrepreneur? Because I think this is actually the hardest, I don't even use the word skill, but things to be able to control. It's like, okay, it feels like the whole house is on fire. Like, how do you keep calm in that kind of situation? Obviously
it's hard, composed, but I think that a lot of the time we worry about things that may happen or may not happen. And I think that just to tackle the situation there and then, I think the person you do it with, those questions need to happen at the start. So if you're going to joint venture with anyone, I think that at the start is great because you feel like you need someone to sort of hold hands with along the way because it feels better. You get to bounce ideas off. But a lot of the time people go into joint ventures and then there's two CEOs, and of course that just doesn't work. So I think that joint venturing with someone, I think that there's things that the other one of you need to bring to the table and someone else needs to bring the other. So one's going to be experience, two's going to be network, three could be capital just in general. But I think that when two people are doing something together, they need to bring something different to the table. Otherwise, without a doubt, you can have disagreements. And then also at that point, of course, you don't know everything that's going to go wrong, but the things that are probably could go wrong, you need to decide what happens there and then as early as possible when you're friends. Because if you can't agree to the things that go wrong there and then, when they go wrong, you almost have no chance in hell in agreeing anything at that point.
And I see this a lot. And this is also why generally, I don't know if you agree with this, like 99% of people I don't recommend should have business partners. Like depending on what your business does, because the issue I see is like two people are best mates. Okay, if they're best mates, they're probably very similar in terms of personalities and skill sets. They're both great at fucking marketing. So then what do they both want to do? Marketing. Then they argue over marketing. Yet then there's no one to run operations of the business. And then the whole thing doesn't work. So like you end up with a super dysfunctional business, whereas you would actually be better off just having two separate businesses at that point.
Yeah. And also another thing on there is usually the skill set of the leader in the business usually becomes the biggest weakness in the business long term. Because if you were to grow the business to eventually sell, if you can, then let's say, for instance, you're very good at marketing. You're like, okay, I'm going to hire a CMO or whatever. That person comes in and then all you're going to do is constantly scrutinize all their decisions because you're good at marketing. So sometimes you smother them and don't let them become the person they are, or actually just bring what they bring to the table, what you hired them to do, because you don't allow them to be free because you know you're good at that as well. So sometimes that can be detrimental to the company, even though a lot of the time you may feel that you're right. That's a challenge.
That's why one of the things I said to a lot of people is like, you can have control or you can have growth. You can't have both.
Yeah.
Because the reality is people want to like be control freak of everything, but then, okay, that's cool. But they're the chief everything officer, but your business isn't going to scale when you've got a job. Or you can like find someone else who can do is 80% as good as you and go and redeploy yourself somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Look, when you've grown something from the ground up, you're naturally going to feel you're the best at everything and no one can do what you can do. It just happens. Delegation's the hardest decision to make because you feel like, am I making it at the right time? Do I have the money to then offload this to somebody else? And then if I do pay this person to do it, are they going to be able to do it as effectively as me? But like you said, is it going to be impossible to scale for you to do everything? And also, I think that when we're talking about growing something, there's a lot of people out there with great ideas. And, I told you I admire your speed of implementation, right? I think you do need to fail fast and move on. But I think that intention and execution are two different things. I think there's so many people out there that intend to do great things and have great ideas, but they're just terrible at executing. And, an example I like to use of this is, Kodak, the camera company. Yeah. So they had an engineer in the 70s that invented the first digital camera, right? And obviously that is a wild invention. And he took it to the board. And they basically said, we can't run with this. And they sidelined the idea because they believed that it was going to cannibalize their print business, which, is a fair point. But eventually they filed for bankruptcy. So the intention of ideas are great. But if people don't execute on the ideas or don't adapt or innovate, then, ideas on their own don't change the world. Not executed ideas do. And that's why people like Elon are so successful. I feel like when you're either starting something or if you've bought something, ideas are great. But when you're especially a startup company and you're the founder or there's a few of you, everyone has good ideas at that point. But because you're so focused on surviving, some of them ideas never come to fruition or some of them are hard to execute on. So I think that, you can have an unfair advantage just by taking action. And I think Sam Altman said this, right? And this is the person who's at the forefront of AI. He said this like about a month ago. Along the lines, I'll probably botch this, but along the lines of, if you find something and focus on it and take a long-term approach to it, you already have an unfair advantage on everybody else because everyone else is looking for instant, and the world's getting even more instant now. So people jump on trends and, you see it now. People are like, I'll streamline your company with AI. I'll optimize systems and processes. And it's like, okay, great. And that's the difference in problem solver versus visionary. I think we talked just before then about consultants, and sometimes consultants come and they're like, they're a problem solver. So they may just say, how can we improve this process? But then a visionary will look at it and be like, all right, so, what is the process? Why does it exist? And actually, do we need the process?
Do you need to be doing this?
Yeah.
What problem does it solve?
Exactly. And I think that's the problem now. You've got all these new businesses that are like, I'm amazing at AI, so I can streamline this system and process. And a lot of the time, you don't even need the thing that they're streamlining for you. And I think that's where people get stuck, especially now more than ever.
So a quick interjection. 90% of fitness coaches never actually scale their business and get the time freedom, location freedom, and financial freedom they want. Not because they're not good coaches, but because they're missing the systematic approach to scaling their business. And I've been there. I was trapped in a job working 60 hours a week, making £3,000 a month, trading time for money, like everyone else. Now today, our 7-figure scaling system program has helped over 500 coaches scale their business systematically. Hitting the first 5K a month, 10K a month, 50K a month, 100, 200, 300K a month. The difference, we actually help you by plugging in and playing the exact systems we use in our own fitness business to help you get the exact same results. So if you want to get out of being in that feast and famine cycle with your business and with your mindset, we're offering free strategy calls. We'll actually audit your entire business, If you want us to walk through exactly what the bottlenecks are, where you're stuck, and how you can fix them, hit the link below the podcast. You can book in the call, and we'll help you take your business to the next level if we think you're a good fit. Either way, we'll just give you a ton of value. Now back to the podcast. In my opinion, it's now easier than ever to execute with AI and technology, but it's also easier than ever to get distracted and get red shiny object syndrome. So because you have the ability to be as successful as possible, it's also easy to be distracted with trying to do too many things badly rather than trying to like absolutely slate everything. And I think there's a saying I like, and it's like an idiot will beat a genius when a genius is focusing on 5 things, an idiot just focuses on 1. And I have to catch myself a lot of times being like, this thing I'm doing right now, is this worth doing or is it not worth doing? And kind of like one of the things I think about a lot is this a high leverage task or is it low leverage task? So if I'm speaking to someone one-to-one, low leverage task. If we're filming a podcast, this is a high leverage task because we can clip this, it's going to go on the internet and it'll continue to get views when I'm dead. So that's kind of like the way I try and think in terms of from a scale standpoint of like, is this going to compound for me longer term? And also in terms of like decision making, like strategically with a business, for example, what's the potential upside of this in terms of long term? Like we spoke about this a bit earlier on, like versus kind of what you're doing now. Like you constantly, I think, have to understand you have the business you have now, and then you have the business you're going to have tomorrow. And the reason most people don't have a business tomorrow is because they're not actually thinking 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, you know, I think that it's hard to take a long-term vision on things in the world we live in. It is hard. Like, you know, I'm not exempt from it. All of us get distracted by shitty TikTok videos and content, you know, and also AI, right? You see all these different shiny objects, new things popping up. It's growing so fast. And, you know, you want exposure to a lot of this because you're like, oh, I don't want to miss out. But, you know, a lot of the AI things that are out there at the moment, they're not as good as they're made out to be. I get targeted ads all the time on this is the thing that you need for this. This is the thing that you need for this. And when you actually look at it, you're like, okay, when you peel it all back, ChatGPT, realistically, the reason why that's at the forefront and that's leading the way is because it's the best. There are other things that are great, of course there are. And, you know, I'm not an AI expert, but a lot of the things I dabbled with, and we talked about this last week, right? Like vibe coding, for instance, it's incredible. It's like, wow, look what you can do so quickly. But we talked, you know, it's gone from people spending months and months and months, you know, writing amazing code. And then someone else needs to come and be like on the UX and UI and be like, we need to make this look aesthetically pleasing. And now it's flip reverse. It's like, we can make it look amazing, but it doesn't function very well. And I think that AI at the moment, there's a lot of testing that needs to happen and you can easily be distracted. And just on long-term vision, have you read 38 Letters that Rothschild wrote for his sons?
No, but a few people have recommended it.
It's incredible, right? And 5 the principles I took from that book. And this, if you follow just these principles, you won't go far wrong. Number 1 was preserve capital and don't take on an unnecessary risk. Number 2 was build information and networks. Of course, they had access to insiders and governments, but just with influential people in general, which environment's obviously massive. Number 3 was diversification, but with discipline. Number 4, which is I think most people get wrong, is operate quietly. Discretion is power, and never put on any public displays of wealth. And then number 5, which you'll probably resonate with now, having a little one, is family unity. So they was big on preparing children as early as possible, take over the family dynasty or legacy. I think that all of those 5 things, the only way you're going to execute on any of those is if you take a long-term mindset with them. And I think you won't go far wrong with them, but most people aren't willing to take the long-term vision because they need something instant, which I get it. We all want proof of concept. But the reason why most people aren't successful is because they don't give something enough time.
And this is why I see most people can't actually scale their business. So for example, we have a lot of people scale their businesses running like VSLs and paid ads as an example. And you may run a campaign for 2 weeks and it doesn't work, you lose money. Okay, cool. Does that mean the whole thing doesn't work? No. It means you probably need to kind of fix something. And I think this is where everything is kind of just numbers based and data. And if you know what numbers you're kind of looking for, you just fix the thing that's broken and then the thing should start to work. But the reality is most people have no fucking idea about the numbers in their business. Like I mentioned to you earlier, like I spoke to someone in their business, it took them 5 days to then be able to give us like the profit margin of what they're doing. I'm like I know off the top of my head, like everything like that. Like you should know these things kind of inside out, like as if you're going to get grilled on the spot, like gun to the head, what's your profit margin? Like how much you turn, like you should know these things. And I think people make business unnecessarily difficult for themselves from that aspect. And also they probably have more anxiety than they should around the business because they don't know their numbers well enough.
Oh yeah, I think that, well, one of the things we look at just immediately, the 3 things we look at when we're looking to buy a company, and I think it's important to be able to understand the emotions of buy side and sell side, because then you kind of know what each person's looking for. So obviously if you're selling a business, you can just do some reverse due diligence on what you'd look at to buy it, if you was to buy it. But the three things we're looking at is, one, what the business truly earns, not what the seller claims it does. So the quality of earnings. Then number two is dependency. And that comes in two ways. So one, the dependency on a key individual in the business, because replacement cost for one person, especially if they're a true entrepreneur, it's probably going to need three people to replace that individual, especially if they're bringing in a lot of the revenue as well. And then number two is the dependency on customers. We talked a bit just a minute ago around customer concentration. Of course, if you're making $1 million from 3 individuals, you're better off making $1 million from 100 individuals. Yes, it could. There's a lot more resource that goes into it, but you're not going to lose a massive or 30 your business if you lose one individual. And then the last is upside. So, and when it comes to upside, this is the part where I feel that people get wrong from an operational perspective, and also if you're looking at acquiring a company, because it's not just what the business is today, it's what the business could become. And if you're already maxed out, and obviously there's no real ceiling in business, you could go and buy another one, but you want to look at where the business is at today and how you can improve it. And when it comes to improving it, and the same as whether you're improving, turning around a business or scaling a company, initially people will look at, okay, is there pricing changes that we can look at? And a big one is, we can optimize the cost of the business. And if the business is coming into an existing ecosystem, yeah, you could look at cross-sell, upsell opportunities, some consolidation. But when it comes to cost cutting, and I'm all for stripping out costs, especially unnecessary costs. But again, back to like a consultant, it'd be like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to stop doing this because we don't think that we should be doing this. And the company's going to be run way more efficiently if we strip this cost. But what they don't look at is the consequence of stripping the cost. So if we're stripping a cost and it's going to compromise the fulfillment of the product or service of the company, it's like long term, that's going to have serious damage. Short term, it looks great. It's like, we boosted margins for this, but what does that do long term? And I think that there's always a consequence of changing something in a company, but sometimes people look at just the thing and they don't look at the spider's web of all the different things off it. And you don't want to overanalyze because you won't get anything done. But, a lot of the time people do that. I don't know, Rory Sutherland, you must have heard of him, but incredible guy, right? I'd love to spend an hour with him. And he talks, I think it was either in his book or on one of his podcasts, and he talked about a big hotel chain that acquired a bunch of hotels, and it's a 4-star hotel chain, and they took away the bellboy. And they're like, we're going to strip out the bellboy, it's going to save X and boost the bottom line. And then what they found over time is revenue started dipping because the bellboy serves more than the purpose of just a salary. They open the door for people. They tell people, where things are in the city. They call taxis. They're not just a salary person that's just there and opens doors. Yes, you can automate it and have self-checking, etc. But there's more to it. So sometimes stripping out a cost, you need to look a little bit more deeper on the consequence, stripping out a cost. So when it comes to improving and scaling company, there's more than just, we'll just change this. And if you don't have, back to your point, full visibility of financials and you don't have the data, then what are you doing? That's big.
But I think this is where most people are kind of guessing, but it's also the same in terms of their own like personal finances, like the people that don't track their own net worth, how much they spend every month, like all these type of things, I think is kind of fundamentals that, like, we work with a lot of people who are maybe younger, who make a lot of money very quickly, and then they don't maybe have much to show for that money because they're buying stupid shit or business class flights that they shouldn't maybe be paying for. And I think that is ultimately not understanding how kind of money works. I'll ask you a question. What do you think are the best books for people to understand maybe personal finances, business finances? Well, I've got two.
If you have no idea about personal finances, I think probably the best book just to get to grips on, personal balance sheet is going to be Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think that just to open your eyes. Obviously, it's very basic for people that's been in business for a long time. That would be number one. If you want something a little bit more advanced for personal net worth, I don't know the second one for personal net worth. But I think for business acumen, I think Scaling Up is...
It's up there somewhere.
Yeah, I think that book is incredible. If you want to learn how to grow and scale a business, understand the cogs that make that happen, I think that is it simplifies it better than any book I've ever seen. There's loads of great books, right? But I think with AI now, you can pretty much go into ChatGPT and be like, summarize this, give me the top 10 bullet points, and then you can use those, takeaways and then go and research them and look at those parts of the book, because obviously books are made up of a lot of filler as well, right? But yeah, there's so many books. For personal net worth, I would just say look at Rich Dad Poor Dad first. Once you understand the process that obviously Robert Kiyosaki talks you through, then it gives you a good idea on what to do from there.
Controversially, I think his second book, Cash Flow Quadrant, is better than Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think that's good enough. I was going to give a business book. I think Profit First is also one I recommend to clients. I haven't read that. It's very, very, very good. But I think you also mentioned something there, what I actually did this morning, which is instead of reading the whole book, I wanted to read a paragraph, like what's the best paragraph in this book? Like give it to me. So I literally put ChatGPT, like it was actually Winning from Tim McGrover. I was like, give me the best paragraph to read in Winning from Tim McGrover. I was like, that's fucking sick. So I think like that's where you can also use AI to kind of accelerate your learning. And I think this is where people don't actually understand, like the most valuable thing you actually have is your skills, because if you learn more and you have knowledge and then you also have the mindset to apply and execute on those things is when you become successful. I think one of two things happens though. Either people are ignorant or arrogant that they don't want to go and learn skills, or secondly is they become obsessed with education, but they are lackluster when it comes to implementation. And you have to have both to be educated and have the ability to implement, because otherwise you end up implementing like a blind fool, or you end up just becoming the smartest dude in the room who doesn't do anything.
With AI, you mentioned a few things there. I think with AI, I think to start with, rather than learning how to use it and how it can improve your business, I think it's understanding first, learning how to use it for yourself first. Because once you understand, like AI is only as good as how you use it, right? So I'm botching this a little bit, but you taught, I think last week, a bit about using it in many different ways in your personal life. And then I suppose that's when you can figure out how you can use that transferable knowledge into your business, because people immediately go into, how can I use it to improve this? And they don't actually know how to use the AI, whether that's an LLM or something else in the first place. How do you think it's improved, firstly, your personal life before you used it in your business?
I say most importantly to help me in terms from a decision-making standpoint. So often I even do like on crypto stuff sometimes, because it can remove the emotions from things. So like it knows I'm having a daughter in October. It knows my goal, what I want to do. So I'm like, this is happening in crypto. Should I sell or should I keep fucking holding till it keeps going up? And they'd be like, you're retarded, just sell and take the money. I'm like, okay, cool. And I think that's where I use it a lot from that aspect to help a lot from like a decision making, or almost like a bouncing kind of buddy of ideas. But the big thing that I also find it can be very helpful is also even from a journaling perspective. So like, give me the 5 best questions I should ask myself this morning based upon my goals and where I'm at with life. And it will give you the 5 questions. I'm like, okay, cool. So like, what do you think are the best like 5 answers I could give once I've written mine 5 out? And it will give you them like, oh, fuck, I didn't think of that. And that's where it can almost start to teach you and do your own thinking for you. The most important thing with this though, is actually having the right information into it. So a couple times a week, I'll export all the Zoom calls that I have and conversations into AIs. I'm kind of building like a second brain, so it knows everything about me and like what I'm doing. So I can ask it specific questions and it can also give me specific answers. And this is how you know if your AI is well trained. If you ask a very general, broad question, it can give you very specific answers.
Okay, and then from how it's improved your personal life, because I think there's some serious takeaways there. I need to use a few of those myself. And then business-wise, what's been most effective for you in business with AI?
I'd say probably the most effective thing, I'll come from a couple of different ways. One would be, okay, where have I saved the most time? Dude, the easiest thing now is coming up with creative for content. Like you can push stuff out so fast on platforms like LinkedIn, email, like copywriting, like stuff that would take so long to write before manually. And we were paying someone thousands of pounds a month to do previously. Like their job's gone, AI now just does it, and it's phenomenally well. So I'll give you one hack that if you like my emails, then reply back to me and just let me know. I send one email a week that's just like a newsletter, and I will record a voice note for like 3-4 minutes of just generally what I'm thinking is going on in the world, my thoughts, what I've learned, things I've seen, patterns, or like just trying to give as much almost like life advice to like me 5 years ago. I'll send that to our head of our content team, who will then take the voice note, run it through AI, and make an email from it. And emails are bang, they're so good. We then take that email and then also put it as a newsletter on LinkedIn. So for me, spending like 3 minutes talking into my phone, this is all getting distributed out. And that's where, again, like we're creating like high leverage stuff all the time, because it's literally, I spoke for 3 minutes to my phone while I was on a balcony on holiday, and then all this stuff's kind of coming off the back of it. And I think that's where AI, like Dan Priestley said this to me, he's like, And I remember it distinctly. He was like, AI won't replace everyone. You have a marketing team of 100 and AI will replace 98. The best 2 people will then absolutely decimate everyone else. And it's the same thing that's going to happen in business. So this is going to be the great divide. It's going to be people who know how to use AI, but also highly intelligent and strategic thinking in terms of how to apply these, because essentially it's a tool. And the people who don't think that way are the ones who are going to get left behind. And this is essentially down to your own creativity and your intelligence and experience of like, how can I take this superpower and then apply it to my business and also my life?
Yeah, that's pretty powerful.
I think the AI thing, it reminds me very much of 2015, 2016, in terms of where social media started to like kind of rocket off. And there was this big opportunity of kind of what was happening. And I think the same thing's happening again. And there's probably a 2-3 year window where people can really capitalize on this. And I think a lot of people are getting left behind either by getting really bad advice or just sticking their head in the sand and kind of hoping it goes away. And I'll actually be transparent. I kind of wish AI didn't happen because everything was going great anyway. And I was like, oh, this whole new thing's coming that's changing everything. And the reality is, it's like, okay, it's going to happen anyway. Technology's going to advance. It's like, would I rather be resentful or would I rather be kind of like the market leader in the thing? And it's like, I'd rather like to try and be the best at the thing so then I can utilize it to my advantage.
Yeah, and I think this is happening across companies at all different levels, small businesses all the way up to PLCs. I think that, a lot of them, like I think it was Bezos, he pretty much retired and he came back to work and said, I spent 100% of my time on AI because the opportunity is so big and it's going to change the landscape of all business. And I think that, you're going to see, very small teams achieve incredible things, whereas before, to achieve that same thing, it would have taken a huge team. And I think that, the spaces that I'm in, I look at private equity and I'm like, this is up for serious disruption, like serious disruption. You can have very small groups of people that can achieve the same returns. Maybe won't be able to go and buy $100 million company or $1 billion company, but they'll achieve better returns than you guys because they're going to be more agile. Those guys are like the Titanic when you can operate like a speedboat, and because decisions are much quicker. It doesn't have to go through a board and all the other things. And I think that's going to be the difference because, as you mentioned earlier, quick feedback loop, very quick. You can fail fast, whereas they're too scared. Like someone in a big corporation, if they do things the right way, how it should have been done, and it fails, is okay. If you go and try and make a decision that is out of the norm and it fails, you get sacked. So they're just stuck in I have to do it this way, even though the upside of this way, if this works, this is great. I think that that's going to be the massive difference now. If they don't start being more agile, the top 5 companies, probably top 5 companies in the world in 10 years, it's going to be hard to, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, although they got first mover advantage, right? But in the top 10, 6 of them probably haven't even started yet.
Do you really think that?
I think that we're going to...
What industries do you think they're going to be based in?
I think they're probably going to go across multiple industries. I think that what Elon's doing at the moment with all of his companies, I think that's all going to end up being one company. I think you're probably going to see that's just going to become one. And I think you're going to probably have someone that will probably lean into all the disruptive tech with AI and be able to change multiple industries at once with AI. So for instance, if you look at like healthcare, for instance, a lot of the, predictive analytics is going to be able to change everything. Like you're going to be able to go into like a care home and there's going to be something you can just stick on the wall and it's going to be able to predict certain health conditions. And then that same tech potentially could be used in a car. Oh, we'll predict this, or in a building, predict structural faults, and then all the other stuff that's in construction. There's things now like smart concrete that they're using in China that self-heals cracks. And then you've got aerogels that is good for insulation. You have solar panels. So you have windows that have solar panels. They generate energy for a building. Like when you look at like the UK, I'm thinking, you talked about a housing crisis for I don't know how many years. Why aren't you using 3D print construction already? Why? You're trying to solve an issue apparently that's there, and you've got all this tech that's out there, and because of nonsense legislation, you're just falling behind. So I think that companies that will find something that they can use across so many industries, and I think it'd be so disruptive. The problem is with that is the monopoly then. Like what happens to all the other companies if you have, Yeah, and a lot of it's data, right? If you get the right data, and some of those big companies out there now already have it.
Well, that's why if you look at like people like ChatGPT and OpenAI are building these massive data centers. And I watched, like, how much of a nerd I am. I watched like a YouTube video on them building like one of these things, and like the size of it is like the size of a town. I think somewhere in Texas. It's insane. And I think this is what people don't realize. That like it's actually kind of what I think it's happening here, but not from a tech perspective. It's like I drove to Fujairah at the weekend. Dude, it's got like the best tunnels I think I've probably ever seen in terms of like infrastructure. Like, and I've been all over the world. The like infrastructure in the UAE in terms of like outside of the cities, you're like, they're clearly planning for massive expansion. And this is, I think, where you've got to see like when something's got the wind in its sails, like it's going a one way like direction in terms of like AI technology, even if you look at like certain countries like Dubai versus maybe somewhere like the UK, which is where I think sometimes people kind of trying to fight the game of making money or entrepreneurship with one hand tied behind their back because maybe they're biased to a narrative that's no longer correct anymore.
Yeah, and I think the UK and Europe, they have there's restrictions on AI, isn't there? So, you know, so why would you cripple yourself going into, you know, the evolution of something? This doesn't happen all the time. It's like, you know, the thing is with like the .com bubble back in the day, and then, you know, when we went through the first phase of social media, they couldn't be stopped, but you could have sat on the sidelines and you've seen what happened, right? And, you know, there's been ups and downs in it, but with AI, I can't think of any time really in history that something's changed and moved this quickly. Like the people that build AI can't keep up with AI. I think I've seen like the Claude CEO was like, it's doing things now that it's doing it by itself, and we're struggling to keep up with the tech.
Well, I heard that ChatGPT they were struggling to try and maintain functionality because it's taken over it's adding over 1 million users an hour, 1 million an hour. So like the adoption is like the fastest in human history of like one tool. And I think this is also where people need to understand that these tools are happening and it's going to change the landscape. And I think the innovation in terms of, there's new ChatGPT coming out this month in August. They've also just added in ChatGPT AI agents, which isn't that great yet, but I think it will be good eventually. Like where it is now from where it was 12 months ago is massively different. And I think this is where it's going to be in 3 years' time is a very different landscape. And that's also why I say to people is like, in my opinion, you have now until maybe 2030 and then fuck knows what's happening. Because it like maybe not even until then. So like, which is why my advice to everyone is like, you need to go all in on like your business and shit the next 2 to 3 years. Otherwise it's like, no one knows kind of where things are going to go at that point.
Yeah, and how useful you're going to be as an individual at that point. You know, I think that like using it for the things that are really going to move the needle is people in business now. You know, when you look at, I think everyone is obsessed with, you know, getting new customers and just growing top line, which of course is great. You have to continue to try and get new customers. Like you said, how many people ChatGPT are onboarding. But I think customer retention is the thing that gets overlooked a lot. People constantly just pour so much water in the top of the bucket and they just forget to fill the holes at the bottom. I think you can use AI to understand the customer a little bit more. There's a massive disconnect between customer and business owner. You know, I think I actually shared this stat with at your event a few years ago. But Bain & Co, they did a study on this. They went out and spoke to a ton of companies, and they asked these companies, do you believe you deliver a great service? 80% of the companies said yes. Then they went to the customers of those companies and said, do you believe you received a great service? And only 8% said yes. So there's like a 10x disconnect between business and customer. And I think that one is our job to bridge that gap, but understanding your customer is a massive part of the process. And of course, you know, it's like 25 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than sell to an existing one. And 90% of churn happens at the time of sale. So it's like you're trying to grow your business. Sometimes you don't need to grow the top line. You actually sort out what's happening in the business at the current period of time. And I think there's so many shiny objects out there and so many different trends that people chase. It's hard, you know, it's hard to be focused on what you currently have. You always want something more and want something different, but focus on what you have and improving that. And obviously making sure you're in the right vehicles, the most important part, because, you know, not that you want to keep changing and you do have to give stuff time. But like I said at the start, you know, the life I wanted, being a PE teacher, obviously wouldn't have gone me that life, you know, even if I was the best in the world.
So you obviously were kind of adamant what lifestyle you wanted, and I would say has probably achieved that. What do you think are the key skills you've learnt along the way to be able to do that, and how have you learnt them?
Mindset is number one. And I know it's the thing that people overlook most, because, people think of...
What specifically a mindset?
Resilience. I think that not being scared to fail. Like, no matter what happened, I don't think I would have stopped. I've got such like a competitive mentality. No matter what I do, I want to win. And I don't know where that like really come from, because obviously my dad wanted to do well in life. He wasn't, I wouldn't say that the most competitive person. My mum definitely isn't. So I don't know where that came from. But I think that's been the biggest thing for me. And when I talk to people, and if I help someone in something, I always try not to talk too much on mindset, because I can't compete with like Tony Robbins and that, right? I'm not going to compete with him. Just go and watch a Tony Robbins video. But I think that when people say, oh, you need to get your mindset right first, people overlook it and be like, no, I need the detail. I need the thing that's going to get me the thing. And it's like, well, if I'm honest, that is the thing. Because there's some people that aren't very good at a lot of things, but they've got a mentality to win and want to win, and they end up being successful. So I think mindset's the biggest thing. And just probably the fact that I'm just obsessed with progression. I think the more you can be obsessed with progression as an individual, and that's on everything. I think that's a massive thing. Just you're never going to get to the stage where you can't learn something new. And I think that I speak to people where you have conversations with them and they just feel like they can't learn anymore. They're just like, they think that they're the best at what they do, and that's great. But if you're the best at what you do, who are you going to learn from?
But you might be the best at what you do right now, but you might not be 3 years, because the world moves very quickly.
Yeah. Or with AI in 6 months.
Yeah. So mindset was one. What would you say are the other skills?
I think because I wasn't academic, I thought I had something to prove. Like I always felt probably imposter syndrome. I go into a room and I always think I shouldn't be in the room, because like I said, I wasn't very good in school, and I wasn't very good at tests. So I felt that I need to learn something inside out. So for me, it was, if there was something I thought I needed to learn, I would make sure I would research and learn it to the point where you could ask me anything on it and I will know the answer. And I felt that it was probably a bit of battle with myself, and I had to prove to myself that I could do something in such granular detail. So I probably got obsessed with data on a lot of topics as well. I think that helped me a lot. But yeah. When
do you think you got rid of the imposter syndrome?
I still get it now in times, I think it's good to have. I think that knowing that you're good at something is one thing, but I think that if you're not consistently pushing yourself, I always go into rooms, I'm like, how the fuck am I in this room? And sometimes you speak to people in the room and they know you shouldn't be in the room, but you have a conversation with them and then you walk away and you're like, I should be in the room. I've just had a good conversation with them. So I think you'll always have it.
I also think that people who are ahead of you always have massive respect. If you're like, in terms of the way you conduct yourself, the way you turn up, like the questions you ask, and like how determined you are. And I think that's one of the things that I look at with, say, anyone we work from a business perspective, is like, how do they turn up every day? How quickly do they execute? What questions they ask? Because like those are the three things that ultimately determine how successful someone's going to be. The reality is, I think people, like you said, they obsess over tactics and like these weird fucking strategies, this miracle thing that's like white unicorn that's going to blow up my business. And the reality is, a lot of it's actually on the individual to have the right skill set and tenacity to kind of keep turning up with it.
The process in most things is simple. People just don't want the simple process. They always want the secret. And the secret usually is keep going. I know it's crazy, but there's always going to be things you're going to pick up through experience, which you're like, oh, that's cool. That's an industry hack. But most of the time, it's just keep going until it works. Find the right industry that's going to get you the life you want, and just keep pushing forward until you get it. I think that everyone's too obsessed with secrets, and
I think they're over obsessed with like overnight success. If you look at, say, like someone like Alex Ramosi, he's massive on social media now, but it took him, I think, 48 months to blow up, like quickly, overnight success. And I think he spent like $2.5 million in content doing it. So like, it wasn't by fucking luck or chance.
Well, look, how many successful people right? All your neighbors, right? If you asked, everyone you have asked to date, how many of them have said, I've started something and in 6 months I crushed it and I just started? When does that ever happen?
Never. I would say it's a minimum of 3 to 5 years. In my head, I think 3 to 5 years of everything.
And that's why the long-term vision is so important. I think that people just get so caught up in online, and like you just said with Hormozy, people look at people online, they don't realize how long that's taken, and that's why people give up. You know, you upload a YouTube video. You know, I've been doing YouTube for a few years, probably not as well as I should have, but I still upload videos now, and I'm like, why is that stuck on a couple of hundred views? Why isn't it moving? Why is that short, not done anything? It's just it is what it is, you know. I'm sure he does it as well. He's probably uploaded videos, maybe not so much now, but he's uploaded videos, and other people that are great on YouTube and great at doing what they do. Not everything is gonna be a success.
Well, the way I'd frame it to anyone is just a sign you need to improve at what you're doing. So then, like, okay, analyze what's not worked. Why? How can I make this better? Who's done it better than you? And then find them to try and get that person to help you. And that's kind of like what I've obsessed over with my career. Even like why I'm fucking flying to Vegas at the weekend for 44 hours for one day, because like there's people who know stuff I don't know who might be able to say one thing to me that can completely transform everything. And I'm willing to put myself out on a limb to try and find those things.
So see what you mentioned there, I think this is powerful for anyone listening who is on a similar journey, is people hear about the comments from people and say, I'm going to this meeting or seminar or mastermind, and if I get one thing is worth it, right? People overlook that, because that literally is it. Whether you pay 10, 50, 100 grand or 500 quid for a ticket to somewhere, if you walk away with something you didn't know, it was worth it. And I think that's where people get caught, because they're like, I can't justify the price tag just in case. And sometimes you just got to put yourself out there, you know, like you wouldn't be going to Vegas now if you didn't go first to be like, oh, that was worth it. That made sense. I had value from it. So I'm going to go back and learn from someone that knows more than me. If you're not obsessed with progression and you're not consistently searching for it, you will just hit a ceiling and you'll hover around, and eventually it'll go the other direction, because other people will go and do the things that you're not willing to do.
Well, it's that analogy is that the wolf climbing the hill is hungrier than the wolf at the top of the hill. Yeah. And that's why I'm always obsessed with, almost like trying to create competition for myself with other people, because then it gives me someone to kind of push against. And I think that's also something as men you probably are driven to have from like tribal days of like competing, which if you actually like break down psychology of human beings, like women want security, men want status. So what is modern day status essentially is wealth, success, all that type of crap. And that's essentially the game that the hedonic treadmill men are like constantly spinning around on, is like, how can I keep kind of moving up this scoreboard that kind of never ends?
Well, I don't know which book it was, but there's a book, I'm sure it was, I don't know if it was Patrick Bet-Davids or...
Yeah, it's Choose Your Enemies Wisely.
That's the one.
It's a great book.
Yeah, and yeah, choose your enemy, because it doesn't have to be an enemy, but someone in your industry that you pick them as your enemy and you compete against them, even if they don't know you're competing against them, and naturally you get natural progression from it, because you force yourself to level up because you want to be better than them. And also it's good to pick the enemy that's usually a few steps ahead of you, because then you force yourself to level up, and you're always keeping yourself on your toes. I think that's important.
What do you think are, outside of AI, the fastest growing industries in the next 2-3 years that people should be, if they're looking for like opportunity vehicles, what do you think that those lie in, and maybe where geographically in the world?
So I think that the biggest opportunity outside of AI, I think, is buying companies. And the reason being is because we're going through the largest transfer of wealth in history. It's already happening, it's already underway. If we just look at the UK, half of the private companies in the UK are held by one generation, the baby boomers. 5.5 trillion pounds, which is a huge number of wealth, needs to be transferred to the next generation. And when you compare, the US is just a completely different ballgame, like 10,000 baby boomers are retiring a day. If one of those boomers own a business, the chances are it's a pretty successful business. If you're, in that age bracket and you still own a company, it's probably done pretty well and has decades of historical data. And then when you look at the difference, everyone's obsessed with starting something new. And, it's cool. It's a cool journey until it isn't. It's very cool when it's nice and optimistic, where you have all these great ideas, until realism comes and punches you in the face a few times. And then you start to realize this ain't actually that fun. It's not my passion. People are passionate. And everyone talks about follow your passion, follow your passion. It's like, if you're passionate about something, as soon as it fails or becomes uncomfortable and you feel a bit of discomfort, the passion starts to fade away. People, if I said to you, you can have a company that sells pet food and, it's going to make you 3 million quid a year, I bet you start getting quite passionate about the thing you didn't think you were passionate about. So when it comes to starting a business compared to buying one. There's two different things. You actually get to focus on growing the business, and you get to focus on the ideas instead of having a survival mindset all the time. And also, like, the stats for the first 5 years, like almost every single company that starts fails, is even worse. Only a third of companies make it to a decade. So it's like, the probability of a company starting from scratch and becoming successful, is a challenge. So that's why I think that that's the biggest opportunity, because you have a generation of individuals, all the wealth, pretty much most of the wealth in the world, especially in Western society, and that wealth's going to have to be transferred to the next generation. And the next generation, I don't want to speak out of turn, but most of them are just fucking degenerates. They want to be TikTokers. They make it's such a big opportunity. It's hard to shy away from it.
The fact you just moved also from the UK to Dubai, what pushed the move for that? And do you think it's easier for people to be successful in maybe somewhere like the UAE or even maybe the United States than it is in the UK?
I think, yeah. So first point, I moved here because we're selling a company, which of course the tax environment in the UK isn't very favourable to entrepreneurs at the moment. You get penalised. So as you know, I think we met a few years ago here when we both first set up here, and it was always somewhere I wanted to move, and I probably give myself all the reasons why now wasn't the right time. Now wasn't the right time, having a family as well. But so that kind of forced my hand, which I was glad about that. I think, this is quite interesting. So a cousin of mine moved to the States 25 years ago, with nothing, slept on his friend's sofa, done incredibly well, built a biotech company, sold to private equity, the biggest PE firm in the world. So he lived the American dream as a Brit, right? I brought him here about 2-3 years ago, and he's obsessed with saying, you should move to the States. You should move to the States. Everyone should move to the States, live the American dream. When I was taking him back to the airport, he said to me, I said, what do you think of it? He said, if I was an 18-year-old today, I'd say, forget the States, come here. He said, because this has the same buzz that the States had when he moved there. So I think you can come here. If you come here with no money, then it's going to be a challenge. And I see a lot of agents come over here and, they get caught up in all the distractions because it's very easy to get distracted here. So if you come here to work, you'll do well. But I do think it's important to come here with probably a bit of a safety net, because it's, quite expensive to live here. But I also think that the US still holds a serious opportunity. So yeah, I think that if you're in the UK at the moment, can you make something out of it in the UK? You can, if you focus and pick the right vehicle. But if you want to be around the right environment, I think that it'd be a good decision to come here and put yourself out of your comfort zone if you can make it work.
I also think for anyone who has an online business, if you have your business based in Dubai, it's a completely unfair advantage strategically. Because even if you, let's say you're not paying VAT, cool, you can spend 20% more on marketing without even really giving a shit, like top end. So like ultimately a lot of online business is a traffic game. If you can get more eyeballs, you can make more money and you can convert them on the back end. And that's where I think is actually a huge unfair advantage for companies based here competing against people, say for example, in the UK or Europe. You almost can't compete. And I also think the big thing, the difference of taxes, for example, with the US versus the UK, the US is a lot more favorable to entrepreneurs in terms of their tax system, where you can kind of work things around it. Whereas I think the UK, it's almost a point where it's at the point of what's the point? Because you can't actually, the government owns basically your own company at that point, because they're making more from it than you are. Yeah.
Well, biggest real shareholder that isn't actually a shareholder is HMRC. They get paid regardless. And I think the problem in the UK is, especially like you mentioned in an online business, the revenue taxes are just crazy. Like you get taxed on revenue, and it's like you said with VAT. If you're an online business or most service-based businesses, really, you're just getting penalised for top line growth. And then like I'd be happy to pay tax on profits. If the only taxes associated with a business is tax on profits, I think that's fair, within reason, pay tax on the money that you make. But to get taxed before you make any money is just a crazy way of running a country. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with the UK is a lot of these companies, if you actually look at them, and I look at a lot of service-based businesses, and I'm like, you can't afford to operate in the UK. You're getting penalised being an entrepreneur. So at that point then, it's like, do you just take the risk off the table and just go and get a job And then, okay, is that even safe anymore to get a job? And I think that because of AI, most people are probably going to have, I don't know, 5 to 10 mini careers in their lifetime. Whereas, our parents' generation could have probably gone through the traditional education system. They could have, got a skill or a job in a trade or in corporate and probably thought, I can do this forever, pay into a retirement pot, maybe buy some investment properties and retire. And, that worked. That's 100% not going to work for anyone in our generation or any generation below. There is nothing like that you can do. There's ways that you can earn copious amounts of wealth, probably quite quickly in the grand scheme of things with AI. And then maybe you can sit back and decide to do what you want to do. But there's no way, when I look at my children now, I'm scared. Like we've decided to homeschool, and, it's not the most cost effective thing to do, but I think that I need to do the best for the children. And I think that, how is the traditional education system going to set them up in this world? The traditional education is already outdated, right? How are they going to, with AI, I don't understand how it could possibly keep up. Like, what am I going to say to my kids? Go and be a lawyer. That all the most desirable jobs that people would have taken even 5 years ago, they're like, well, is that even going to be a thing by the time they go through the next 10, 15 years of school? So, and this is already happening. So there's a school in Texas called Alpha School. They only learn 2 hours a day, the children, with AI, and then they work on social dynamics in the afternoon. They're already in the top 2% of students in the country. Like, it speaks volumes. So I think that that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment is if you're a kid in school now or leaving school now, what do? You're getting pretty much pushed into further education. And I know this firsthand. I went to speak at my old school probably about a year ago now. And my PE teacher's now the deputy head. So luckily I was good at that subject. I went in and spoke to the kids and I was just asking them what they wanted to do. And just before I spoke to those group of individuals, the head of year came in and was like, there's a load of you that still haven't filled out your college forms or your sixth form forms. Make sure you get them in. And it's like, you're pretty much forcing their hand, and it's a shame because I'm not saying there isn't a place for education, but I don't understand at the moment, maybe it will change, how any form of establishment is going to be able to keep up and prepare kids for the world we're in today.
So my advice for anyone who says 16 to 18 is try and find someone as an entrepreneur you can work for, even if it's for fucking free for 2-3 years, because you will learn so much being in that business, even if you get paid bugger all, but you're getting paid to learn. And this is also one of the things, my background from my previous job, I now have a lot of experience as managing teams, working within big corporate companies, because and I was getting paid for that. And that's what people don't even understand. And coming back to the tax thing, something wild I realized yesterday is I've actually spent more in speeding fines than I have in tax in Dubai in the last 6 months, which is, when you actually think about it, it's kind of ironic. But I think this is one of the things that it's set up as a country to kind of push you for growth, and also even the people coming here with families, because one of the things they are teaching in schools already is AI here. They're not teaching that in the UK.
There's a new school too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. That's which is amazing. And like the thing here, so there's companies that come here that went bankrupt in the UK. You got Debenhams, Mothercare, Wimpy.
Yeah.
I thought Wimpy was a thing.
There's a Wimpy here.
Yeah, so there's a few.
Bro.
So I haven't seen one of them in a
Since I was a kid.
Yeah. So there's a reason why they work here. Like, for instance, you look at retail in the UK. It's so hard, right? Go and take a walk around Dubai Mall at any time of the day.
Bro, it's packed.
I'm talking about 11 p.m. at night. There's queues to go up escalators, and there's a reason. They've done a great job here of attracting all the entrepreneurs and all the wealth around the world to one place. I think they've done an amazing job of it. But the velocity of money gets stimulated by economic activity, right? And the reason why it's so active here is because everyone wants to come here because it's so appealing. Taxes are low. Labor's cheap, right? And I know some people look at that in different ways, but there's a reason why people want to come here. Whereas when you look at the UK, it's like, well, taxes are high. You get penalized for being an entrepreneur. So why would you want to go and hire people? Because now employment rights are through the roof. So you have to make sure you make the right hire, which is hard first time round. They're trying to take away probation periods. It's like tenant rights. It's like, so wait there, you can go and live it. So you buy a house to rent out. You have a tenant that can just sit in the house and just not move. And then you have to take them to court. And then if you win, then you have to pay to get them out if they don't leave, even after that with bailiffs. You employ someone, you can't get them out the company if they don't perform. Well, this is a performance-based economy. If you don't work or you don't perform, you get fired. Same as America. Like, why don't we look at the countries that are working and try and model ourselves on those? You know, I was in Albania last year. We fortunately got to sit down with Eddie Rama, the Prime Minister, and they're looking to come into the EU. And I basically asked him a question like, how do you see yourself stimulating economic growth here? And his words, and this is on video on YouTube, he literally replied and said, well, we're just going to look at what the UK did wrong and just do the opposite.
That's so funny.
It's like, you made too many mistakes.
But if you look, a lot of the Eastern European countries are actually doing quite well.
Yeah.
Because they put themselves first and they have the right culture, right values, right ethos. Whereas the West has kind of lost its mind, I think.
I just, sometimes some of the decisions that are made, I'm like, who was in the room? And who was
I'll give
like...
you an example. Why would you put VAT on school fees?
Yeah.
So then people take their kids out of private school and then they put them in state schools that then the whole government has to pay for the whole education.
And they're struggling to recruit in state schools. Like, I don't know the exact stat. Someone can go and look it up. But I would be interested to see the split between full-time teachers and supply teachers in most state schools now in the UK. And the reason being is because that job is such an unappealing job to go and have when you leave school. You know, where I remember in school, the reason why I want to be a PE teacher is because I thought it'd be a pretty cool job. Like, same as nurses, right? Like, they say there's this big problem with so many agency staff now getting paid so much more than full-time nurses. Well, okay, pay the full-time nurses more then. Like, why would you want to, like, think about it? And I think that it's obviously, it's a key job to have. Like, we need nurses, we need doctors, right? Until AI comes in and
robots.
Yeah. But, you know, let's be honest, why would a nurse want to be a nurse in the UK right now? You don't get paid great money and you have to deal with all the shit. Lack of resources. It's just, with no wonder the NHS is the way it is.
You're a parent. How did that change you from a business perspective?
Well, which part?
Like becoming a parent and having the kids.
Oh, right. Oh, massively. You know, talking about the Rothschild principles earlier on, you know, I was much more of a risk taker. Still a risk taker, but I do take more calculated risks now. That's everything. I think that every decision you make is more than one person to think about, where you can get quite selfish in decision making, I think, when you're on your own, because why not, right?
Fuck it.
Yeah, fuck it. But I think, yeah, definitely for me now. And also it's just, I think it's made me a better person, because I think that in life, you know, you can say one thing, but I think that it's important to demonstrate competence. So if I tell them you should do it this way, or you shouldn't do this, and if I'm doing the opposite, it's like, you know, because I had that growing up. You know, I think that with your parents, most parents really just try and do what they think is best for their kids. And a lot of the time, you're going to get a lot of things wrong because you're just doing what you think is the best. But I think as a child, it's our job to look at the parents and be like, okay, I like this and I like this, but I didn't like this. So, you know, you take the good things and then you sideline the bad things. So I wanted them to be able to take more good things and not them to think, especially I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to say you shouldn't, like, I don't drink, right? So I don't want them to be like, say, you shouldn't drink alcohol. And then they see me drinking alcohol, think like, well, it doesn't make sense, right? So I think it's made me a better person across everything. I think about the things that I do.
Do you think it's made you more successful in business?
Yeah. Just because I feel like it's like people talk about your why and purpose. It gives you purpose because, again, you know, I want them to be successful. I want them to be better than me. I actually seen like a short on Instagram, and it was like, the only person that is happy with you being better than them is your dad. And for me, and what's crazy, when I seen that, I was like, you know, obviously my mum the same way, but I think my dad actually, I think that, you know, he'd be super proud if he was like, yeah, you're better than me. And I think it's true. And the reason why I think it made me better in business is because now I feel like I don't want to be the one giving them all the good advice and not have the things I'm telling them to do. I can't be sat there when they're 16 years old and be like, you need to do this, this, and this to become successful. And then in the back of their mind, they're going to be like, well, why didn't you do it? I can't have that.
It's like the business teacher who teaches business but hasn't got a business.
Yeah, I got in trouble for that when I was in school.
What are you saying? Yeah.
I said, you know, I asked them, and I went and did a small accountancy course in college, but I didn't end up following through. But I asked them about why didn't you become an accountant? I got in trouble.
I want to ask you one last question. I think you mentioned before that one of your daughters is entrepreneurial.
Mm.
What would be your best piece of advice for her maybe in 10 years' time?
Oh, you put me on the spot. I don't know. There's so much I could say.
If you could pick one.
What she'll cover all of it. It's probably the thing I wish my dad asked me. Figure out the life that you want and make sure the thing that you're doing is going to get you the life. If it doesn't, don't do it. Move on to the thing that does. I think that covers everything else.
Yeah, I think that's something up more. Big thank you for your time today. Where's the best place for people to find out more about you?
Probably most active on Instagram. So D_Ludlow is probably, yeah. And if you want to watch me mess around on YouTube and do vlogs and try and think of shit to do, follow me on there.
Yeah, we'll drop those in the show notes below. Anyone tip value for podcasts, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave us a review as well. It would also be massively appreciated, and share it with a friend. More episodes coming up soon. And also, if you're interested in listening more about like buying businesses, entrepreneurship, probably the best episode for you to listen to is the one on screen now with Jeremy Harbour.